Every child knows that the human body consists of approximately 60 to 65% of water. But what kind of water does it consist of? Is it true that water contains drugs and hormones? How much water does a person spend during his life, and for what? Is it possible to desalinate the ocean? Let's find it out together now. So, we all know that lakes, rivers, groundwater, and glaciers are the main reserves of fresh water, meaning that they contain less than 1% salt. But the fresh water that you and I can drink makes up a very small proportion of the total volume of water on the planet. In fact, it's only about 2.5%. The rest, or 97.5% of water, is genuinely unsuitable for drinking, for one simple reason: it's salt water in the seas and oceans. But did you know that it wasn't always like this? Initially, all the water on our planet was practically fresh. Yes, this is true. But during the formation of the planet, as the rocks were destroyed, the water washed various minerals and salts out of them. Volcanoes released various chemical cocktails of chlorine, fluorine, bromine, and other compounds into the atmosphere. Magnesium, potassium, and calcium were released from the Earth's crust. And as a result of chemical reactions, acids formed salt. Well, another reason is evaporation. Over time, water evaporated from the oceans, but salts and minerals remained in the water, and their concentration only increased over time. Thus, the once fresh water in our seas and oceans has become more and more salty, and now the oceans contain something like 1.3 billion cubic kilometers of salt. This is so much that if you try to distribute it over the entire surface of the earth and land, this layer of salt would be the height of a 40-story building. Well, one more important point. Most of the fresh water is in accessible forms, such as glaciers and groundwater. So, when we talk about 2.5%, we're also exaggerating, since only about 0.3% of fresh water is available for consumption in lakes, rivers, and reservoirs. This is what makes fresh water such a valuable and limited resource. And now you're probably thinking, why not just take and desalinate salt water? After all, there is so much of it, and thereby solve the freshwater problem. It might take some time and some resources, for example electricity. But again, is it worth it? Unfortunately, even if we imagine that we could desalinate all the water from the oceans, it would only lead to a catastrophe. Why? Well, at least because if all marine life is placed in fresh water, the animals will die and the food chain will collapse. Hundreds of thousands of people and animals whose diet consists of fish and seafood will have no food, which will lead to hunger, poverty, and death. Also, desalination of the oceans will affect plant life, and sea and ocean algae will die in freshwater. And they, by the way, play a decisive role in photosynthesis, the process that supplies our planet with oxygen. Without them, the planet will have less oxygen and more carbon dioxide, which will again lead to irreversible climate consequences. So, don't think of ocean desalination as the solution. But there is a solution: to improve methods for purifying existing fresh water and taking care of the reserves that we have now, so that our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren will not have to worry about where to get drinking water for themselves. But let's figure out how humanity uses water at the moment. For drinking and cooking? Well, yes, approximately 10% of fresh water for these purposes. We use about another 5% for washing hands, bathing, showering, laundry, and cleaning. Now, what about factories and industry? Fresh water is used in power generation, the chemical industry, steel mills, and other plants. So, industrial use of water accounts for another 15% of the total supply. A certain amount of water, literally a few percent, remains in nature to maintain the ecosystem in rivers and lakes. There are so-called environmental needs that are critical for the conservation of biodiversity. But what about the rest of the freshwater resources? The answer might surprise you, but according to the World Bank and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, about 70% of fresh water is currently used for food production, for watering vegetables and fruits, for livestock farming, as well as in production of animal feed, and of course, for growing field cereals such as rice, wheat, corn, oats, and so on. They all require a lot of water. You know what's more? The UN Population Division estimates that we will need to feed 1 billion more people by 2030, meaning food production must accelerate now. I wonder how we are going to feed all these people and produce more food, given that our planet is running out of resources such as pure water and healthy soils. And this got me thinking, why are we running out of water? In fact, the shortage of fresh water for agriculture may become critical in the foreseen future. Although we all know that we need to protect and save water, turn off the tap while brushing our teeth and take a shower in under 4 minutes. But you must admit, we do not always follow these rules in everyday life. Besides, it all depends on the region where you live. In the USA, there are some traditions. In Europe, there are others. And in India or Africa, is already good enough. Even in developing countries, there is generally running water and sewerage. Since this, alas, is not always the case. I talked about this in my episode about toilet development, and I strongly recommend watching it right after this episode. But let's figure out how water gets into our homes in the first place. If you live in a modern house or apartment with running water and sewerage, then the source of water, in your case, are most often the rivers and seas located nearby. Pumping stations pump water from rivers and seas and disinfect it with chlorine to eliminate bacteria before it gets through pipes into homes. The pumping station supplies water at the same speed, but we use it unevenly. For example, at night, we hardly use water, right? So we have large and tall water towers to make sure that the water supply is always ready to be used. These towers accumulate a large amount of water, and from there, water flows through pipes into your home anytime. But it's only cold water we're talking about because our houses have a central heating system. When it comes to hot water, there are special heat exchangers that heat the water between the house and the heating plant. Okay, now let's get back to the actual topic. What if there is neither a river nor a sea in your region? Then what? Then the source of water will be ground wells. People learn how to get groundwater and artesian waters relatively recently. And to provide your home with clean water, you need to drill really deep wells. Somewhere groundwater can be closer to the surface, and somewhere at great depth, up to several hundred meters. In general, there are 3 layers. For irrigation household needs, you can take water at a depth of 4 to 13 meters. At a depth of 10 to 20 meters, you can get drinking water. And at a depth of 25 to 100 meters and deeper, you might find clean artesian waters. But regardless of the depth of the well, you will need to install additional cleaning filters. And then you will need pumps, pipes, water towers, heating plants, and so on. That seems to be all. We all have water running at home. What's next? Let's say you're at home washing dishes, taking a shower, or using the toilet. In your neighborhood, there is a car repair shop, a hospital, a farm, and a factory, and for a moment, you have one sewer system for everyone. Yeah, and of course, dirty water, which conventionally contains all kinds of contaminants, fats, organic and chemical soils, biological waste, and so on, ends up in the sewer system. And yes, about an hour after flushing the water down the toilet, it already enters the treatment plant, and this water will already be clean in about a day. Marvelous? Well, it certainly is. But let's take a closer look at what modern wastewater treatment plants actually are. Of course, everything again depends on your region, municipality, and legislation, but the general picture is something like this. Wastewater treatment plants consist of special basins into which waste and sewage water flow. The water purification process consists of several stages. The first stage is mechanical cleaning. This is when water passes through the grates, clearing various large debris such as bags, newspaper, diapers, tides, and pads, and yes, unfortunately, some people still flush this stuff down the toilet. This is terrible, never do that. The second stage is biological treatment in the pool with microorganisms such as bacteria that purify the water by literally eating all organic substances. The third stage is chemical cleaning with special additives, for example coagulants such as aluminum-containing salts. Here, some particles of dirt stick together into large flakes, so-called flocks, which makes them easier to separate from the water. The next stage is when these flocks settle at the bottom of the sedimentation basin. These large flakes seem to remain at the bottom, so we have clean water at the top. Later, the remaining small particles and flocks are removed. The water passes through a layer of filter materials such as sand and activated carbon. While at the very end, we need disinfection to destroy bacteria, viruses, and other microorganisms. Usually, this process requires the addition of chlorine, sometimes the use of ultraviolet, irradiation, or ozone. So, dirty water can be successfully purified from many types of contaminants using modern treatment facilities, including biological, organic, and inorganic. Do you think the water after cleaning is as good as new? Are you sure there is nothing odd in it? There's an interesting question, and there is something else that people don't even think about. Well, in fact, the quality of tap drinking water depends on many factors, and one of the most important, oddly enough, is the high regulatory and legal status of your region and state. But what if your local authorities and water supply companies are unscrupulous and do not monitor the condition of pipes and underground communications as often as needed? Then the risk of water pollution is quite high. How is this even connected? Very simple. After all, even perfectly purified water, before entering your home again, passes through kilometers of metal pipes, and if these pipes are damaged, old, or rusty, then the likelihood of secondary water contamination increases significantly. When corrosion begins to occur in old metal pipes, part of the metal can dissolve in the water and contaminate it. What's more is that the interaction of chlorine desacidification water with metal pipes again accelerates corrosion, some kind of vicious circle. Unfortunately, often the municipality is worried not so much about the quality of water and the health of its citizens as about the safety and durability of the pipes, and simply adds various anti-corrosion additives to drinking water instead of carrying out regular maintenance and replacement of old pipes. Well, okay, let's assume that you have new cool pipes, no rust, everything is fine. But what about monitoring the quality of the water itself for the presence of complex contaminants? Is there anything that water treatment plants cannot treat? The fact is that in addition to all those listed earlier, there are types of contaminants that are more complex and require special cleaning methods. In addition, elevated concentration of pesticides, nitrites, and phosphates can often be found in water, as well as toxic heavy metals such as cadmium, mercury, lead, and chromium. They often enter water from industrial sources and require complex processes, such as chelation, to remove them from water. Yes, you might also have heard about the dangerous surfactants, which are contained in almost all detergents and cleaning products such as soap, washing powder, and fabric softeners. It's good if you buy household chemicals carefully looking at the label and take products with biodegradable surfactants. But if not, then keep in mind that wastewater treatment plants do a poor job at removing them. Therefore, they get back to us through the water supply in almost the same concentration in which we pour them into the drain. Also, some chemical compounds, such as perfluorocarbon compounds, nuclides, and radioactive pollutants, also require a special approach: irradiation or reverse osmosis. I really hope that your municipal authorities are seriously working to control and improve this process. But this was not always the case. For example, drinking water quality standards were introduced and regulated by law only in 1974 in USA. Before that, there were many cases of poisoning and documented severe consequences of drinking water. For example, the notorious long-term contamination of drinking sources with the same perfluorocarbon compounds and perfluorocantonic acid in the United States. Then, due to the fault of manufacturing companies, including manufacturers of fire extinguishers and water-repellent coatings such as Teflon, about 100,000 people were injured. Many people in the region developed cancer, and children were born with multiple congenital deformities. The worst thing is that, as it turned out later, manufacturers had long known about the dangers of the substance for people and animals, but taking advantage of the gap in the laws, they chose not to lose their profits on the installation of expensive treatment facilities. In general, water pollution with dangerous compounds by manufacturers of various goods and raw materials is a serious problem that manifests itself in one way or another in different parts of the world. For instance, a leak occurred at the chemical plant of the Union Carbide Company 40 years ago in India. There was a release of harmful chemicals, and according to various sources, the number of victims of this disaster is estimated 150 to 600,000 people. In Japan in the 50s-60s, the Chiso Corporation released mercury into the sea. This caused Minamata disease among local residents and led to severe illness and birth defects in children. In the 1890s in Brazil, due to violation of aluminium production technologies, high concentration of fluoride were recorded in water, leading to diseases of bones and teeth. And just recently, in 2010, a chemical plant in China leaked hazardous substances into the waters of the Amur River, including antifreeze and other hazardous chemicals. A year later, a Chinese enterprise released a large amount of cadmium and lead into the Guangzhou River, which resulted in the poisoning of local residents. It would seem that all these episodes of man-made disasters emphasize the importance of strict regulation and monitoring of production enterprises. But what a pity that society and governments are thinking about tightening regulations and legislation in the field of water protection only after similar incidents have already occurred and thousands of people have suffered. And you know what? Few people think about the fact that wastewater treatment processes are not always able to completely remove traces of pharmaceutical substances, medications, and even drugs. The greatest danger comes from concentrations that, along with urine, end up in the sewer system, especially antibiotics and anti-cancer drugs, as well as hormonal and contraceptive drugs, which can ultimately end up back into our tubs after cleaning. This is why you should never flush any medications. Anyhow, whether we like it or not, we drink water that contains this entire cocktail, hence getting more tolerant towards any antibiotic. In fact, this is one of the most serious threats to animal and human health according to WHO. Although the level of pharmaceutical contaminants in drinking water is usually low, many researchers are paying attention to the potential risks of even small quantities of pharmaceuticals in drinking water. What else? Of course, there's also plastic. Did you know that global plastic production increased to a record 390.7 million tons in 2021? Unfortunately, most of it ends up in waste in the ocean or land. In the last few years, the term nanoplastics has generated a lot of interest and concern due to its possible effect on humans. Because synthetic plastics are not completely biodegradable, they tend to persist in the natural environment and become micro and nanoplastic particles. In 2019, the WHO reported that plastic particles were found in tap and bottled water, in a variety of foods, including fruits, vegetables, and even meat and milk. The presence of nanoplastics in air, water, and food causes ecotoxicological problems. One of the main concerns is their genotoxic potential, and recent studies confirm the presence of plastic particles in human theoretical blood. Thus, in the latest study, plastic particles were found in almost 80% of tested people. It is believed that plastic particles enter the bloodstream either through contact with mucous membranes or carried by certain types of cells, but the exact route remains unclear. You may think that this only applies to the water we drink, but the water we bath and shower in can be dangerous too. Yes, it's true. You see, when we swim in bodies of water near sewage and untreated springs or in areas with serious environmental problems, our skin can also absorb dangerous chemicals from the water. So while researchers in many countries are looking for new ways to remove toxic substances using membrane filtration and absorption, there's a list of don'ts for you. Do not pour hazardous substances down the drain. Do not throw garbage. Do not swim in dirty water. Do not drink tap water. Do not skim on water filters. And think about what kind of water you drink. Remember that traces of various contaminants can be found in tap water even after all standard cleaning processes. So, if you are the hero right now who is inventing ways to recycle water, purify it, or otherwise treat it to reduce pollution and improve water quality, let us know how else we can help with that.